Berlin, May 1st, 1945. As Soviet artillery shattered the city, one man walked straight into enemy territory. General Hans Krebs, Hitler's chief of staff, emerged from the ruins on a desperate mission. With Hitler dead and the Nazi regime collapsing, he carried the dictator's final testament and a plea for surrender. This moment wasn't just the end of a war, it was the end of an empire. But who was Hans Krebs, and how did he become one of the last men standing in Hitler's bunker? Hans Krebs' journey from a young volunteer in the Imperial German Army to Hitler's last chief of staff is a tale of ambition, skill, and ideological alignment. Born in 1898 in Helmstedt, Germany, Krebs volunteered for military service in 1914 at the outbreak of World War I. Despite his youth, he quickly demonstrated a natural aptitude for military affairs and an unwavering dedication to his duties. During his early years in the army, Krebs faced numerous challenges as he sought to advance through the ranks. The rigid hierarchy of the German military system often favored those from aristocratic backgrounds, making it difficult for someone of Krebs' modest origins to stand out. However, his exceptional performance on the battlefield and his keen intellect soon caught the attention of his superiors. Krebs possessed an extraordinary talent for languages, becoming fluent in Russian, French, and English. This skill proved invaluable throughout his career, enabling him to thrive in roles that demanded international communication and diplomacy. Following World War I, Krebs stayed in the military, taking on various roles as Germany rebuilt its armed forces under the restrictions of the Treaty of Versailles. His career took a significant turn when he was assigned to the Defense Ministry in the late 1920s. It was during this time that Krebs began to develop a deeper understanding of geopolitics and military strategy. His work at the ministry brought him into contact with members of the Red Army, as Germany and the Soviet Union engaged in clandestine military cooperation in violation of the Treaty of Versailles. These interactions with Soviet military personnel had a profound impact on Krebs' worldview. Initially fascinated by the organizational structure of the Red Army, he gradually developed a strong aversion to communism. This ideological shift was further reinforced by the growing anti-Semitic sentiment in Germany after the war. Krebs, like many of his contemporaries, began to associate communism with Jewish influence, a belief that would align him closely with the Nazi Party's ideology in the years to come. In 1933, Krebs was appointed as a military attaché in the German embassy in Moscow. This position allowed him to utilize his Russian language skills while providing valuable insights into Soviet military capabilities and political dynamics. During his time in Moscow, Krebs meticulously observed and reported on Soviet military developments, further cementing his reputation as an expert on Eastern European affairs. As tensions in Europe escalated in the late 1930s, Krebs' expertise became increasingly valuable to the German military leadership. His deep understanding of Soviet military capabilities and his staunch anti-communist stance made him a trusted advisor on matters relating to Germany's Eastern Front. This expertise would prove crucial as Germany prepared for World War II. As Germany launched its brutal invasion of the Soviet Union, Krebs was sent to the Eastern Front, where he faced the relentless force of the Red Army. By 1942, he had risen to Chief of Staff for the Ninth Army, positioning him at the center of some of the war's most devastating battles. The following year marked a significant milestone in Krebs' wartime career. As Chief of Staff of Army Group Center, he coordinated massive offensives, including Operation Citadel. The operation aimed to eliminate the Kursk salient, but it became a turning point in the war. German forces suffered heavy losses, ultimately failing to achieve their objectives. Despite setbacks on the battlefield, Krebs continued to rise through the ranks. By 1944, he had reached the position of General of Infantry. However, his rapid promotions coincided with the increasing pressure on the German military leadership as the tide of the war turned against the Reich. As the situation on the Eastern Front deteriorated, Krebs grappled with the devastating consequences of Operation Bagration. The Soviet offensive shattered Army Group Center, forcing a massive retreat. Krebs' role in managing this crisis tested his strategic abilities to their limits as he worked to salvage what remained of the once formidable Army Group. By September 1944, the war had shifted dramatically. Krebs transferred to the Western Front as Chief of Staff of Army Group B, facing the daunting task of coordinating defenses against the advancing Allied troops. This period included the desperate German counteroffensive, known as the Battle of the Bulge, Hitler's last stand in the West. As the Reich crumbled, Krebs was pulled into the eye of the storm, appointed Chief of the Army General Staff on April 1, 1945, a futile promotion as Nazi Germany stood on the brink of collapse. As the walls of Berlin crumbled under Soviet artillery fire, Krebs descended into the underground labyrinth of the Führer bunker. The air in the bunker was thick, an oppressive mix of cigarette smoke, sweat, and desperation. The distant thud of Soviet artillery shook the concrete walls, sending dust cascading from the ceiling. As chief of staff, he was tasked with coordinating Berlin's defense efforts, a challenge that grew more impossible with each passing hour. Throughout these tumultuous days, Krebs struggled to uphold a sense of military discipline. He continued to coordinate with what remained of the German forces, but his efforts were increasingly futile. On April 28th, he made what would be his last telephone call from the Führerbunker, informing Field Marshal Wilhelm Keitel that if relief did not arrive within 48 hours, all would be lost. Amidst the chaos, Krebs became embroiled in one of the bunker's most bizarre episodes. On April 28th, he participated in a military tribunal to court-martial Hermann Fegelein, Hitler's brother-in-law. The absurdity of the situation was impossible to ignore. Fegelein was found to be too intoxicated to stand trial, a reflection of the dissolution that had overtaken the Nazi leadership in its final days. Hitler's behavior had become increasingly erratic as the reality of defeat set in. Krebs, along with other high-ranking officials, found himself caught between the Führer's delusional orders and the harsh realities of the battlefield. The bunker had become a realm of surreal contradictions, where grand strategy meetings were held for armies that no longer existed. As the situation grew more desperate, Krebs witnessed history in the making. On April 29th, along with General Wilhelm Burgdorf, Joseph Goebbels, and Martin Bormann, he stood by as Hitler dictated his last will and testament, the document a final declaration of the Führer's twisted ideology. On the evening of April 29, 1945, Krebs reached out to General Alfred Jodl, desperately seeking updates on the status of German forces. The news was grim. The 12th Army was unable to continue its attack on Berlin, and the bulk of the 9th Army was surrounded. The noose was tightening around the Nazi capital. Just hours later, on April 30th, Adolf Hitler and Eva Braun ended their lives, sealing the fate of the Third Reich. The echoes of the gunshot from Hitler's private quarters marked the final, irreversible collapse of the Nazi regime. With their leader gone, the bunker's last occupants were left to decide their own fate. As the first light of dawn broke over Berlin on May 1, 1945, Krebs embarked on a mission that would determine the fate of thousands. Krebs carried a letter from Joseph Goebbels, Hitler's propaganda minister, and now the self-proclaimed Chancellor of the Reich. Goebbels had outlined what he considered acceptable surrender terms, hoping to find some middle ground with the advancing Soviets. As Krebs approached the Soviet lines shortly before 4 a.m., he was ushered into the presence of General Vasily Zhukov, the commander of the Soviets' 8th Guards Army. Krebs began the meeting by informing Zhukov of Hitler and Eva Braun's deaths. To his surprise, Zhukov's face remained impassive, claiming to already know this information. The atmosphere grew tense as Krebs attempted to present Goebbels' proposed terms. However, Zhukov refused to agree to the terms outlined in Goebbels' letter or to negotiate further with Krebs. The Soviets remained steadfast in their demand for unconditional surrender, as previously agreed upon with the Allied powers. However, Krebs lacked the authority from Goebbels to consent to such terms, resulting in the meeting ending without resolution. Traudl Junge, Hitler's secretary, later described Krebs as appearing worn out, exhausted upon his return to the bunker. The surrender of Berlin remained stalled, as no progress could be made while Goebbels was still alive. As Krebs prepared to leave, he realized that his inability to secure any concessions had effectively sealed the fate of Nazi Germany's last leaders. The consequences would unfold rapidly in the coming hours. At approximately 8:30 p.m. on May 1st, Goebbels eliminated this obstacle by taking his own life. Following Goebbels' death, Krebs also became consumed by emotions. On May 2, 1945, with Krebs unable to continue the negotiations, General Helmut Weidling, the commander of the Berlin defense area, contacted Zhukov to discuss surrender terms. Alone in the dim corridors of the Führer bunker, Krebs made his final decision. Like many of Hitler's inner circle, he chose death over surrender. In the early hours of May 2nd, Hans Krebs took his own life, mirroring the fate of the collapsing regime he had served to the bitter end. Well, that's it. Thank you for watching. We hope you found this video informative. If you want to learn more about the fates of other German commanders, check out our video about Walter von Brauchitsch, the fall of Hitler's chief general. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell for more World War II stories, and we'll see you in the next one.